Mick, could you please explain your present position and your background?
I'm the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner with the Australian Human Rights Commission. I'm a Gungaloo man from central Queensland, basically worked all over Australia. Now I'm living in Sydney carrying out this job.
And what brought you over to Perth?
My two girls live in Perth, so I'm over visiting them for the weekend.
So you didn't come over to find out about this issue?
Oh, we didn't have to come here. I didn't have to come to Perth to find out about it. It's all over the news over east, and it's something that we'll keep a watching brief on. And no doubt I'll be talking to Mr. Spratt in the next day or so.
Now, is the use of tasers widespread throughout Australia?
It's becoming more and more widespread, and there's a growing concern about their use. It's gone from almost a tool to rather that replaces shooting, and in that respect, you know, I think there's some benefit in it. But now it's becoming a tool to use for compliance, and I hear in various parts of Australia it's even now used to move people living in, drinking in parks along. So it seems to have gone way outside the scope of what it was originally brought into Australia for, and I think that should concern all of us.
We saw you recently on the ABC Press Club program. What sort of feedback did you get from the journalists after that interview or during
fairly positive. We framed a lot of things around, like my comments on the Northern Territory, for instance. I framed them around, rather than attacking the government for what it was doing, saying how we felt about it. Aboriginal people in Australia felt hurt, and that's a message I got across at the press club. And it's one that we continue to feel hurt for those people in the Northern Territory. I think we have, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, a sense of solidarity. So when one of our group is being discriminated against, they're suffering disadvantage that no one else is. If they're an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we all feel it. Doesn't matter whether we're living in a comfortable suburb in Sydney or in a town camp in Alice Springs. We all feel for that person, for that group of people who are being discriminated against.
And probably not many Australians understand the true nature of the extended family and networks that exist in Aboriginal communities. Oh,
they're very important. That's what defines us really as a mob, our connections, and it doesn't matter where you go to. I was in Arakuna about a month ago, and my first trip up there, and talking to the old people, telling them my mob come from Woorabinda, and all of a sudden I know where I belong, and we had a yarn. So the connection and the extended...
And I saw you smile when you said that. It obviously brought back a nice memory.
Oh, it was lovely sitting up there with some elders, talking about stuff between Arakuna and Woorabinda, and that's what people like to connect with. They like to connect with something they know.
When you think about the topic of reconciliation, and obviously this sort of thing we're hearing about today is a very backward step, how do you see reconciliation moving forward in Australia? What does Australian society, rather than Aboriginal Australian society, have to do?
People like you in positions like mine have a duty to educate people. We need to educate the wider population about us and about our issues, and that we're not just out there having a whinge for the sake of it. We're now seeing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people treated differently. We had Mr. Ward die in the back of a police van. We've had 5 people in the Torres Strait go missing, and the authorities who were charged with a duty to look after people in distress in that part of the world just were out to lunch. Literally, they were at dinner. They ignored these calls for help, and 5 people died. Now, it seems to me that we need to make people understand that's happening in society. It's not something that's happening in a third world country run by dictators. This is happening in Australia, and if you see the tasering of Mr. Spratt in that police station, I often say, Australia's considering ratifying the optional protocol on the Convention Against Torture. Mr. Ward's family, Mr. Spratt's family might be saying, well, why haven't we already done it? And I think, you know, it almost amounts to torture what those people went through.
Do you see?
So we've got to make the rest of Australia understand that. We've got to make the rest of Australia understand that we just want to be treated the same. You know, we're not looking for special treatment here. What we want is to be treated the same.
I was thinking beyond that. Excuse me. I was thinking beyond that. My personal opinion is that our Australian society has a very superficial connection to country, and because of that, what you might call culture is deficient. And I think that needs to be improved for there to be a genuine understanding between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people.
I'd like to go further than that and say the Aboriginal culture is the Australian culture. There's no other culture here. People came over as convicts when they first came here. I don't know whether we want to maintain a culture of convicts. The only culture of Australia that's truly belonging here is our culture. And I think what we've got to do is actually get Australians to accept that. This is there. When people get up and dance and play the didgeridoo, that's not just for Aboriginal people, it's for all Australians. And I think I want to get to the point where we start accepting, where non-Aboriginal people accept that as part of their culture as well.
The importance of country to Aboriginal people, do you see that as a social justice issue, the continuing destruction of nature, like the health of the Murray River system, the state of our natural forests?
Well, the Murray River system's a really great example of degradation and what it does, and it makes people sick. It's making country sick down there. People understand that. The white people, if you've seen the consultations on the plans for reviving the Murray-Darling, people are upset about it. People are suffering down that way. Non-Aboriginal people are suffering. That's because the land's being degraded and the river system's being degraded, and we've just got to get it back. So people are now starting to understand if we don't look after this stuff, everyone suffers.
We're all interconnected.
We can't separate it out.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Tom Trevorrow when he was over here from the Coorong area, Nangangeri man, and we were talking about the Murray River, and he said the government was now coming to his people and asking them what to do about fixing up the river, and he honestly didn't know. He said, it shocked me, he said, and it's very true, my ancestors never had to deal with this.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true, and you know, from the looking after the Murray-Darling to the manage of bushfires, you know, we know people are now going to Aboriginal people to say, how do you manage bushfires? Go to Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, our people have been managing it for how many thousands and thousands of years up there, and so finally people are starting to say, well, we might have something to learn from Aboriginal people rather than just studying them for all the problems that they have. There are actually lots of things we can contribute to this society, and whether it's a Murray-Darling or whether it's bushfires or whether it's looking after the Great Barrier Reef, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people have lots to contribute.
Yep. Mick, thanks very much for your time. I know you've come over to visit your family. I better not hold you up anymore.
No, I've got to go down to see the two girls, grab them and hug them for a while and take them home.
Thank you very much.
In the meantime, I'm going to introduce Phil Moncrief to you. It's another great honour and a pleasure to be here with the Noongar people on the Yamaji from the Ningaloo coast. We own our land up there, and our culture is strong, but our people have died in custody too. I hope that you can understand some of this, what's going on, because all people are hurting at the moment, black, white and brindle, and we are all going through the throes of the demise of democracy. And the main culprits are government. And we have to change the culture of government, we have to change the system, because the system is the thing that is against us. And it doesn't matter who gets into government, they're in part of that system, and it's going to take a very wise and strong people who become politicians to break the system for the people, because I've never seen it so community unaccountable in all my life. I'd like to sing a song for you, and I think you all know this song, so I hope you can join in. It's by a good man. it is washed to the sea. How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? How many times when a man turn his head and pretend he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, it's blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? Sing. The answer, my friends, it's blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friends, it's a blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Thank you, Bob. We have a vigil for human rights, on March 10 here at Wesley on Friday, March 10, which is Human Rights Day. A lot of groups from around Perth are going to gather together, combined effort.